Today, we're going to take a look at which teams have the best shot of making the playoffs. So, I mean, Lions fans, you don't even have to watch. Grossi Posse Packer Nation. Welcome to another episode of Packcast, the podcast where you don't have to be a Packers fan, but it sure does up. I'm your host, Tom. I hope the Packers are number one at Grossi, and today, I already told you what we're going to do. Before we get to that, I want to do a big shout and thank you to our brand new patrons and YouTube members. First, on the Patreon side of things, we got Boto Winter, and we have Random Stuff Loves Static. A big shout out and thank you to you both. And over on the YouTube member side of things, we have Drunk Enough and Jay Sheets. A big shout out and thank you to you all. So this video is not going to predict the standings, in which, who's going to finish number 1, 2, etc. That's going to be for a little bit later down the line because we are only in week 11 right this second. Instead, what we're going to do is we're just going to focus on the AFC, taking a look at some of the teams that are currently in the playoffs and the ones that are in the hunt. We'll be doing the NFC at another time just because it's all too much to put in one video. So starting off with the AFC, the current playoff picture is as follows. Titans at number 1. You got the Bills, you got the Ravens, you got the Chiefs, you got the Patriots, the Steelers, and then the Chargers closing out with number 7. And technically, the amount of teams that are still in the hunt is significantly larger than the NFC. It seems that the AFC is kind of just, it's fair game for everybody, because if you go down and start looking at the teams that are in the hunt, you find the Bengals at 5-4. You have the Raiders at 5-4, Colts at 5-5, Browns at 5-5, and the Broncos at 5-5. Now, we can look at some of those teams and be like, sorry, Brandon Perna, but the Broncos are most likely not going to make it. But you take a look at some of the other teams like the Browns, the Colts, the Raiders, the Bengals, they are definitely in it. Meanwhile, you look at the NFC, and as soon as you're done with that number 7 seed, the next 2 teams that are in the hunt are actually ones with losing records, being the Vikings and the 49ers. And then after that, you're looking at 4 and 6 teams. So what we're going to do today is we're going to focus on each of these teams, take a look at their schedule, see who has the hardest and easiest schedule to go, and try to paint a picture of which 7 teams from each conference are actually going to make it to the dance. So if you look at the AFC, starting off with the number 1 team in the Titans by far have the easiest schedule remaining. And the Titans, listen, they are dealing with a lot of injuries. Derrick Henry, obviously, is going to be out for the foreseeable future, at least probably until January. Meanwhile, you have injuries like to A.J. Brown. Their defense still looking good, but some close calls with the Saints. But taking a look at their schedule, they play the Texans twice still, including this weekend. They have the Patriots, which is going to be a tough game, the Jaguars, the Steelers, the 49ers, and the Dolphins. So taking a look at this, the 2 teams that I see they're going to have the most trouble with is probably going to be the Patriots, and it's going to be the Steelers. Now, we'll see if the Steelers are healthy. I know TJ Watt is going to be out this week, but those 2 teams I'm looking at as probably providing the most amount of problems. So for all intents and purposes, it looks like the Titans are going to be able to snag a playoff spot. They very well could be the number 1 spot, and like I said, we'll look at that in future videos, but it looks like the Titans are going to be able to clinch that, and on top of that, they're most likely going to win their division. Meanwhile, the Bills sitting at 6-3, they got the Colts, Saints, Patriots twice, the Buccaneers, the Panthers, the Falcons, and the Jets. So it's kind of a mixed bag here. You have the Colts, the Saints, and the Patriots twice, and the Buccaneers, which I think could provide some tough matchups, especially against the Patriots, seeing how well they are playing. So with that, you're looking at 5 games that could potentially be a big old problem. And so on top of that, you have 3 games, meaning the Panthers, the Falcons, and the Jets, which I think are definitely winnable for the Bills. They would be expected to win those games. But the Bills, I do not think have the easiest road ahead of them. But for the Bills, I do think that they're still going to make the playoffs. The issue is going to be, are they going to do it as the AFC East champions? Because the Patriots, who are just sitting at 7-4 behind them, still have opportunities to dethrone the Bills, depending on how they finish out their season. And then looking at number 3, you got the Ravens, who are sitting at 6-3, and they got the Bears, the Browns twice, the Steelers twice, the Packers, the Bengals, and the Rams, which is a rough schedule, especially coming off a loss to the Miami Dolphins. Yeah, this could definitely be problematic. The Ravens are one of those teams that they're hot and cold. I mean, they've come away with some like overtime victories and some last second wins, but the Ravens seem a bit inconsistent. And I know I'm trashing them a little bit for being 6-3, but there are definitely some concerns there, especially after that Miami game. You're looking ahead at the Browns twice, and the Browns are just a weird team right now. The Steelers always play them tough. And on top of that, you have the Packers and the Rams. And who knows what's going to go with the Bengals? The Bengals kicked their ass last time. So you're looking at 6 games minimum that are going to be a challenge for the Baltimore Ravens. And so the Ravens, I think out of all the teams here, while I think Lamar Jackson is great, I think that they have a real risk of not actually making the playoffs this year, or they are going to drop down significantly in the standings. Now, if their division continues to fall apart, the lowest they could possibly go is the 4 seed. So that actually might wind up saving them, because if teams like the Steelers, who are still injured, the Browns keep on losing because they have injury issues, and on top of that, the Bengals, who knows what's happening with them, the Ravens might win here by default, but I would express a word of caution here because of what their schedule looks like. Currently, the 4 seed, you got the Kansas City Chiefs sitting at 6-4, a big game with the Cowboys. They just announced that Amari Cooper is not going to be playing, but they got the Cowboys, the Broncos twice, the Raiders, the Chargers, the Steelers, and the Bengals. So not the worst schedule here for the Chiefs. Obviously, the Broncos, those are 2 games they should win. I think they'll be able to beat the Raiders if Sunday night is indicative of anything. The Chargers could be a close game, but I don't really trust the Chargers right this second. Steelers, again, that'll be kind of a up in the air game, and then we'll see what happens with the Bengals. But the Cowboys game, I think, is going to be a real test for both teams to see how good each team actually is. They have the offense that has come alive, but just like the Bills, there are concerns of like what teams they have been able to beat thus far. They beat the Packers, but then again, the Packers didn't have Aaron Rodgers, and they didn't even beat him convincingly. So I think the Chiefs are going to need to really show up for these next few games, or otherwise they might find themselves not even in the playoffs if the Chargers ever decide to get their act together. Then the current number 5 seed, you got the New England Patriots, who just beat the crap out of the Falcons on Thursday Night Football, sitting at 7-4. They got some intriguing matchups coming up. They got the Titans, the Bills twice, and the Colts, followed by the Jaguars and Dolphins. Should be able to take care of those 2 games against the Jaguars and the Dolphins. I'm not really concerned there. So worst case scenario, I think they finish with 9 wins. However, those games against the Bills could determine the division, as they are only 1 game back from the Bills at this moment. The Titans, that could be a tough game as well, and the Colts could give them some problems. So with this, it's going to come out to, are the Patriots for real? They've gone toe-to-toe with some contending teams, like the Cowboys, like the Buccaneers, and they've beaten teams like the Chargers, who are also on this list. If that defense continues to play as good as it is, and on top of that, if Mac Jones is able to play mistake-free football, yeah, they have a really great shot of not only making the playoffs, but also winning their division. So I think you'll definitely see the Patriots here as a wild card team. Will they make a 1-4 spot? That's a different story. Then number 6, you have the 5-3-1 Pittsburgh Steelers. Their schedule is definitely not the easiest. They got the Chargers, the Ravens twice, the Bengals, the Vikings, the Titans, the Chiefs, and the Browns. Out of all the teams that are on this list besides the Ravens, I think the Steelers might have the toughest time getting into the playoffs. They're injured. On top of that, that offense is not really looking so great. The defense, I mean, Detroit just ran all over them and tied with you. And you're looking at multiple losses here potentially against like the Chargers. You got the Ravens. I mean, the Bengals might be able to take them down. I think the Titans and the Chiefs are going to be a tough game. That's 6 games right there. So I'm actually going to predict, I do not think that the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to make the playoffs, considering how difficult their schedule is ahead of them. They can definitely maybe sneak in at a number 7 spot. Right now, sitting at number 6, they have to be counting their blessings, considering the performance they put out last week. I know Mason Rudolph was leading that offense, but yeah, the Steelers, they got some issues. Then to round out the teams that are currently scheduled to go to the playoffs, you have the 6-4 LA Chargers. The Chargers are a team, it's just weird. Their defense is not really doing so good. Herbert is having his good games and his bad games. The run game is just inconsistent. And they're another team that I think they have a benefit of having an easier schedule ahead of them, but there's no guarantees. They have the Steelers, then they have the Broncos twice, they have the Bengals, the Giants, the Chiefs, the Texans, and of course the Raiders. Now, Looking at this, the Broncos twice, the Giants, the Texans, and the Raiders, I think those are 5 very winnable games for the Chargers. Maybe they have some problems with the Bengals. Maybe they have some problems with the Chiefs and the Steelers. But that's just 3 games. So they might wind up with about a 10-7 record at worst, but they need to get things going. I do think the Chargers are definitely going to make the playoffs unless they have a catastrophic collapse, which is definitely possible, as we have seen. The Chargers, I mean, they've been competitive, but when they're losing against teams like the Vikings, it definitely makes you wonder and question some things. So I think the Chargers will be able to sneak in. It's just going to be a matter of where they are 5 through 7, unless the Chiefs, falter. So taking a look at some of the teams in the hunt and which ones I think have the best opportunity to actually make the playoffs. Again, going through them, you have the Bengals, Raiders, Colts, Browns, and Broncos. I'm just going to do us all a favor, and I'm just going to eliminate the Broncos right here because I don't think that there is a planet in which they are going to make the playoffs. So let's start off with number 11 right now and talk about the Browns. Currently sitting at 5-5, have a bit of a tough schedule still to go. They're facing the Lions. They should be able to win that game. The Ravens, they still have to face them twice. They have to go against the Raiders, who I think they'll be able to win. The Packers are going to be a tough game. Steelers could go either way, and the Bengals could go either way. If this team is healthy and finds the balance, I think that they could sneak into the playoffs and actually replace the Steelers here. Considering if they win against the Steelers, if they win against the Bengals, and they win against the Raiders and Lions, that's 4 games there. That might be enough to sneak in the AFC, considering everyone's so on top of each other right now. So I think the Browns have a pretty decent shot at making the playoffs. It's just, listen, you got to get healthy, and on top of that, you got to find that balance. The defense has to kind of find themselves again, and they can't have blowouts like they did against the Patriots. Then moving up, you got number 10 right now in the hunt. You have the 5-5 Indianapolis Colts. They are another team that it's a rough go. They got the Bills, the Buccaneers, the Texans, Patriots, Cardinals. On top of that, you got the Raiders and the Jags. And just looking at this schedule, it's gonna be a rough time. The Bills, Buccaneers, Patriots, and Cardinals, that's 4 games. And 4 games that they could very well lose. So that would, at worst case scenario, that would bring them to a 9-loss season, which I do not think is going to be enough to make the playoffs here. I do not think they're going to win the division, as the Titans have already swept them. So I gotta be completely honest, I don't see the Colts making the playoffs this year. They might be one of those teams that just misses out. But honestly, they might not even have a winning record. Then moving on to a 5-4 team, you got the Vegas Raiders. Another team, kind of a mixed bag with the schedule here. Bengals, Cowboys, Washington, Chiefs, Browns, Broncos, Colts, and Chargers. There's a bunch of games in here where I could see them losing. I could see them losing against the Bengals, the Chargers, the Cowboys, the Chiefs, and the Browns. Hell, they might even lose against the Colts. So putting that all together and looking at what the Raiders have become and kind of how they're slowly diving off a cliff here, if they put up the performance that they did this past Sunday in any one of these games that is going to be super competitive, I don't think the Raiders are going to have a shot at the playoffs. However, there is still time. They're just going to have to beat some pretty good teams in order to go through it. Then finally, the last team in the hunt for the AFC, you got the Cincinnati Bengals at 5-4. Started off super promising. They were number 1 in the AFC at a time, and now things are starting to fall off a little bit. They got the Raiders, Steelers, Chargers, 49ers, Broncos, Ravens, Chiefs, and Browns. Those last 3 games are going to be a brutal stretch, especially if those teams are competing for a playoff spot, which I think they will be. I think they have 4 tough games, so if they lose all 4, they're looking at an 8-loss season. I don't think that's going to be enough to make it into the playoffs, but I think if they're able to come out of the bye and beat the Raiders pretty soundly, maybe things are looking up a little bit. I'm going to say the Bengals probably missed the playoffs, though, just because that last 3-game stretch, they're really going to have to be completely on. And these past few weeks, I just haven't seen it from the Bengals, like when they got blown out by the Browns. And so I'm not really too sure Kitty Goes Meow is going to make the playoffs. I'm sorry. So again, not doing seedings, the 7 teams I think that will make it in the AFC, the Titans, the Bills, the Ravens, the Chiefs, the Patriots, the Chargers, and the Browns. Again, completely subject to change. We'll kind of do this again a little bit later on in the season to see where things are. But that's the 7 teams that I currently have making the playoffs in the AFC. And all I know is this particular conference, it's going to be a wild finish. But let me know what you think down in the comments below. How do you feel about the AFC shaking out? Do you think any of these other teams could actually make the playoffs in the AFC? Let me know. You can always find me at TomGrossiComedy.com or at TomGrossiComedy at all social media you see down below. Check out podcasts on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play Music, Spotify, and of course YouTube. And a big shout and thank you to all the patrons over at patreon.com/TomGrossiComedy and the YouTube members. But thank you so much for watching. I'm Tom Grossi. And as always, go Pack Go.